All
but,
anime profile pictures out. Leave. The door is right there. Leave. You are not allowed. Get out now. Groot, that's anime. Princess Peach, that's anime.
Thank you all for your patience. Aiden had an issue with his camera on the video recording of this for YouTube, so we were taking a minute to get it sorted out. But all three of us are here now as Slime and I rehashed. I wouldn't even call it old beef, Slime. I don't even remember you making fun of me on Bad Melee.
It was old Bad Melee. It was back in like when it sucked and it wasn't funny. But yeah, the old founder of Bad Melee, his name is Griffin. And he always loved saying, well, what does Jacob Braille Wolves think about the situation? And I didn't even know like who you were. He just thought like an esports reporter was funny as a punchline alone. And that's why we bonded, because, you know, we're convinced you were esports pilled, but you're actually not. You're actually based and cool. And I genuinely mean that with my heart. So
thank you. Yeah, I was giving Slime some shit when he explained this the first time, just for the matter of fact alone that like I hosted a Super Smash Brothers show for the better part of 2015 and 2016, and it was like at the time the biggest Smash show, and so it's not like I was like some like random ass sports dude that swiped in from the ceiling.
You care. I think you care in general about the things that you do and say and like put out, and that makes you I don't know, it just makes it's weirdly rare in this industry.
Yeah, well, it's something we talked about too, like on this very specific podcast. I've asked that exact same thing to Lud and Atriok and a few others while they've been here, which is like thinking more. One thing I think influencers haven't done in the past is they just haven't thought about what they're saying. You know, like they just say whatever the fuck they want to say, regardless of the consequence, regardless of if it hurts somebody else, regardless if it sends hate mobs at someone else, or take whatever money, you know, like what I appreciate about y'all's like group of people is that you do tend to think a little bit more long term.
You say that, like, but I will also make fun of like a content creator because I've never watched them and think they're dumb on vibes alone, and then suffer hordes of people being like, you know, making fun of me for that, which is fair. So look, I'm not perfect, but I think when it's time to clutch up, I clutch up.
Wow, that's brave of you.
Shut the fuck up. How about you quit typing? Can you pay attention to the podcast you're on that you're late to?
Sorry, I'm just working I'm just working.
Why? Why are you doing that now when you're scheduled to talk?
Because when Daddy Riot Games sends me a message, I respond.
Ooh, fancy.
Who's esports pilled now?
Me. I am esports pilled because if this project falls through, I'll do something.
The entirety of the FGC is about to be esports pilled with Project L. They're all everybody that said "fuck you guys, esports guys." Like they're about to be very happy when the
Bagman's coming through.
Yeah, exactly.
Jacob, I actually have a question for you about this because a friend sent me something about this morning. Do you think that Riot hires somebody who is actually from the community to be in charge of esports for this particular game? Or do you think they go the route that they always have? Because I feel like the tone for this game is a lot different, but I wonder if it will actually play out into a tangible decision.
I don't know if they'll hire them to oversee the entire thing. There's some really talented, like if they were going to do that, they should have hired Rick Thayer, who just got hired to be, or like ran Evo this year for the first time.
Agree.
Like he would have been the guy, like a dude that can sort of play both sides of the fence, the corporate side and the fighting game, like grassroots side of things, right? Like somebody that's very good at that.
Yeah,
it's a very rare skill set of people in the fighting game community that like have that corporate level experience and have sort of the grassroots like clout and pull and like goodwill among those people. I do think they'll hire people, maybe not that senior level, to like run the whole thing, and ultimately those people will answer into like John Needham, who everybody, you know, all the people that run League and Valorant and stuff answer into. He'll have a final say.
May I be real? May I be real?
Sure.
It's a little time for some real talk. Why are you laughing? What do you have to laugh about?
No, you're right. You never get real, and that's your problem.
I swear to God, every time I have talked to somebody about inner workings with Riot or talking to Riot or like interacting with Riot people, especially higher up, it's like always negative.
Anthony Bruno does not speak for the rest of Mogul Moves. or business operations.
I literally don't. And I think that is to say, like, it's easier to talk about stuff that bad experiences than it is like good experiences, right? Like, because that's should be the standard. But man, like, it always makes me really apprehensive, you know, especially with like something as fragile as the FGC, that when the monopoly man comes in and he's like, Park Place is going to have Street Fighter, and you're like, well, that's cool, but is that scary? We don't know. You know what I mean? It's spooky.
I think I feel so conflicted about Project L. We were talking about it this morning among our staff group, right? And Prime, you're on our teams from like the fighting game background and Smash background. Obviously, I've done like reporting in both those communities, and I am like the league guy, so I know this company like really well. And I like feel so conflicted in the sense of like, I'm glad the FGC is going to have money finally, presumably, and like a developer who cares about the esport as a core part of their like offering, right? More than just it being side marketing, whatever, for Street Fighter or Marvel or whatever title, you know. In the case of Nintendo, it means absolutely fucking nothing. But you know, like, I think more broadly, like, I'm excited for that, but at the same time, I'm just like, God, the expectations of the game are so fucking high, and like, I don't want to be let down.
Yeah,
like, it looks cool.
It
looks like it's a sort of the like assist battle or assist fighting game in the Marvel-esque style. Like, I love that game genre. That's like niche part of the fighting game community. Like, I feel so conflicted. I hope they don't fuck it up. I know some Riot people listen to this podcast. Please don't fuck it up.
If like Yipes and Tasty Steve aren't like commentating the grand finals of Project,
oh, they won't fuck that up.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like
they won't fuck that up. They'll hire the.
I will log off. You know, what I
think
mean?
based on who's in charge of the game already, and like the messaging that is like very apparent through like the gameplay demo that came today, and all the other announcements from before, I'm like not super worried about that part. I'm more worried about like the long-term corporatization of a fighting game and like what that means for the fighting game community. Like, how
is Capcom not an example of that? Does Capcom not do a good job? I feel like they do. I watch CPT, you know, pretty semi-regularly, and I feel like this is cool, right? Like, I don't know, but I don't know enough to.
I don't know.
To judge.
I just don't know if they do enough though. Like, that's like, they have their one like annual event. They like give support to the smaller, like, this, you know, sort of the grassroots community led events. It's like, it's functionally a circuit, right? A SWT type with some money. But like, this is we're talking like apples to oranges. What Riot is going to do with their fighting game, I presume, speculating, knowing sort of how excited people are internally about it and knowing the people that want to work on it. What they do versus what Capcom do is going to be night and day. Like, Capcom is going to be like, we'll throw some money behind it. You know, we'll like get in good with like the Jabaleys of the world and Ricks of the world, etc., to like help them facilitate their thing. And then we'll put together the finale thing at the very end of it, right? Which is usually like third-party production or whatever. Like, Riot's going to be like super hands-on, super hands-on. And to Aiden's point, I think they're smart enough to learn and to like bring in some of the people from the fighting game background to like advise on that journey. But there will be parts of it the fighting game community is going to go, yo, fuck you. I mean, we've seen that in shooters. Like, Valorant is part of Valorant's not perfect. But like, Riot's way more hands-on than fucking Valve is when it comes to Counter-Strike. Like, night and day.
You know what's funny too is like the other end of that spectrum is like, if we had Nintendo doing for us what Capcom was doing for Street Fighter, it would be like, please God, it would be like, oh, Dad came home and he's got, you know, he's got a PlayStation under his arm. You know what I mean? Like, it would be amazing. And you're here saying that Capcom's like maybe not even doing enough, you know, compared to what Riot is able to do. And we're just like, we're here just like, if at all, begging or just wishing Dad wouldn't come home because he's an asshole and Dad, he doesn't let us play video games.
I tell you what, the problem, Dad, it doesn't matter if Dad comes home anymore because I'm 21. And he was gone, and I've already moved out.
Yeah, he's been gone for a while.
Yes. So, all right, that's where I don't want to spend the entire podcast talking about SWT and the cancellation, but I do want to talk about it because both of y'all are, you come from the Smash community. Aiden, you still organize pretty actively. Slime, you're still super engaged with everything as well. And so I do want to talk through it, and I will, for the layman, because there are people that listen to this pod that don't know the whole situation, I will give sort of a as concise as possible timeline of events here to educate people up to speed before we kind of dive into the nitty gritty. So this past week, there was an announcement. We'll start, and then we'll talk about sort of how things kind of conflict with one another
so
in these statements and why we don't
Ken
know the
figured
road
out that you can grab Fox on a flat stage
Yeah.
and you can throw him up in the air, and then you catch him again. Okay, and this was a big deal. That's where it starts.
So yeah, there is an event called the Smash World Tour.
You skipped so many steps, Jacob. You skipped so many days, Jacob.
You skipped level of Melee.
What about when PC Chris won MLG and he had the big check?
What about when Mango did the Nair into the rest? Right? You're being an asshole right now. You're skipping everything.
All right.
Okay, anyway, statement comes out. Sorry.
Yeah, yes. So there is one of the biggest esports games in the world by audience size, by people that watch it, is Super Smash Brothers. I'm sure people that are listening to this have had some sort of exposure to Super Smash Brothers at some point in their life, be that Ultimate more recently on the Nintendo Switch, or Super Smash Brothers Melee as children, which is how everybody here in this podcast right now got exposed to it. There was an event circuit called the Smash World Tour that was essentially a collection of events bookended by a major event that was supposed to be in San Antonio, Texas, this upcoming weekend after next, sorry, if you're listening to this on release. And this event was the culmination, bringing in together circuit points all the way to this. There is simultaneously an event, and notably, that event was not licensed by Nintendo. It did not have a license by Nintendo. It was in the process of trying to get one and jumping through all the hoops. Simultaneously, there is another event called the Panda Cup, which is also its own circuit. It is ran by a company called Panda Global, who are longtime Super Smash Brothers fighting game organization, have been around, I believe, since 2014, if memory serves correctly, but don't quote me on that. Are responsible for has a roster of some of the most successful players in these titles on their lineup. And they announced earlier this year that they were given an official license by Nintendo to go run a circuit of their own called the Panda Cup. Last week, Smash World Tour announced that they would be shutting down their finale event and not doing the tour for 2023. After guidance, they said, from Nintendo, the creators of Super Smash Brothers, that they were not allowed to use the game on their broadcast, the game being Super Smash Brothers, not by Nintendo. And as a result, they announced that they were canceling their event.
Real quick, you as normies out there, you may be asking, well, why didn't they get licensing? Most events, 99% of these broadcasts and these tournaments don't need or require them or have never operated with them.
The anecdote that I like to dig into the bag for is before I ran my first major tournament. It was called Don't Park on the Grass, which was a tournament with about 1,200 people. And this is in 2016, and I got contacted by Nintendo to talk about a licensing agreement, because licensing agreements have been around for a while. And that was probably around the period of time where there was like the first wave of like Nintendo licensing going around at majors. And I got in the call. I'm 19 years old. I get in the call. I read the licensing agreement. I go over it with them. And I ask plainly, I don't understand. What does this do for me? And I that has stuck with me because it didn't do anything. It only provided restrictions to my event and made my job harder without providing any support. And I understand that that's not the purpose of a licensing agreement, but it was also understood that if you ran your tournament unlicensed, that you weren't going to be shut down. So what was the appeal of like getting involved in any capacity? And I think about that a lot. And things have continued to operate that way for the entire like 20-year period, where like majors have operated without these licensing agreements, and Nintendo has been somewhat hands-off, which has like changed, I would say, more so in the past 2 years, where there has been this more concrete effort to get tournaments not only involved in this circuit, but also licensed tournaments outside of that circuit. It's like the second wave of licensing as I see it, because like there was a really concentrated effort to like license tournaments around the sort of like late 2015 to 2017 period, and now Nintendo has come back seeking licenses for major tournaments again in this like 2021 to 2022 period, which is interesting because in that space of time, in kind of like that 2019 period, it weirdly didn't matter for a while. Like the conversation wasn't even really a talking point. So the interest has kind of faded in and out over time. Nintendo seems to like, there seems to be some effort at Nintendo that has been rejuvenated in recent years to like get some sort of involvement or control of the Smash scene that I do not fully understand, like why that would be the case. I can only guess as to why.
The working theory is that whatever, like your tournament is in danger depending on which Japanese executive looks at Reddit that day, if at all. That's like that. That's how it feels. You know, it's like literally a roll of the dice, and you're like, what's going on here?
And part of the problem, or part of this statement that the Smash World Tour made, was that they accused their competitor, the Panda Cup, and its top executive, Dr. Alan Bunny, of essentially being anti-competitive, going around telling people that if they did not join the Panda Cup, that they were going to be killed by Nintendo for copyright infringement purposes, and gave them the option, join our thing or be at risk, be at legal risk. And in a world, which Aiden, I'm sure, can very thoroughly explain as an organizer, you know, we are not talking about multi-billion-dollar gaming companies putting on most of these events, right? We are talking about people who are very passionate about this. They do their best to source sponsorship, etc. You know, they're collecting fees to kind of help make this work. Most Smash events, most Smash tournaments are lucky if they break even. If they make a profit, they are the minority of the events. And so truly, you're dealing in a very particular situation where making a threat of that kind, allegedly, is a significant deal, where threatening someone to potentially act or to kill their tournament and put them in legal jeopardy and them have to lawyer up and fight you for it is a huge deal. And to Aiden and Slime's point, also, this hadn't happened, at least this specific instance. There's been some legal issues with Nintendo along the way, but the specific instance of canceling an event over using Super Smash Bros. Melee and Super Smash Bros. Or Melee at the time, but one of the titles that is not modified, had not happened in a long time. There's an instance of this in 2013 where Nintendo said that they were not going to allow the Smash event at EVO, the biggest fighting game tournament in the world, to be broadcast. And then the entire community ripped their ass on social media, and they said, never mind, we'll let it go ahead as planned, and they backed off. Since they've gotten into some spats, they canceled a community. We've talked on this show about this before, but community made mod called Project M.
Rip
they
PM the GOAT, bro.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah. They cease and desist that. They had an issue a couple of years ago with online, a modification that was made to be able to play online during COVID, where people were playing these games, or the games that did not have net play were not allowed to be played over the internet, were playing it, and they made threats over that as well. But we've not had a like very simple, you use our game on broadcast and, you know, we're okay with it, we're not going to kill you. And a lot of the esports game manufacturers, whether it be Riot, Activision Blizzard, etc., most of them are pretty cool with you broadcasting their games. They don't make direct money from it, but the idea is that they get some level of exposure, and then you buy their game, or, you know, buy merchandise in their game in the case of skins, etc., and some of these titles. Nintendo's a little different, and I tend to think, based off my reporting, that Nintendo does not, and they might be right, Nintendo does not think that Super Smash Bros. Esports moves enough units. Like, people aren't buying the game because of that. They probably already have it, and so to them, it's very much a bottom line decision. That's kind of where we're at. So what's been happening over the past week is that Smash World Tour says, well, we were basically told we had to shut down. Nintendo says, well, we didn't tell them to shut down. And now we're in this weird place where it's just been like mudslinging back and forth, is how I described it in a newsletter last week, where it's basically, we didn't tell you to shut down, but we implied that you should have or face legal jeopardy. And that the Smash World Tour people took that as, well, fuck, we have no choice. Like, we got to shut down, basically, right? And that's where we're at. And the recent update today is that Alan Bunny, who's accused of being anti-competitive and generally quite shitty to his peers, stepped down today as Panda Global CEO. And we said that he would have some sort of evidence to prove that the Smash World Tour is lying.
Yeah.
So that's where we're
also,
at.
really quick, another interjection for the Normans out there who may why do you care? Why do you guys care so much? Like, it's just like a Smash game. This game, Melee in particular, it's like crack for your fingers. It is so beautiful. It is something that sticks with you for the rest of your life. Me and Aiden will be playing this game, screaming at each other until we're 60 years old, because it's that deep and that accidentally amazing. And the reason why that grassroots like scene has been so strong and surrounding it, and Ultimate, and the newer games, right, as they come out, which the scenes are usually kind of schismed, but it's just the fact that they're that good. You know what I mean? As a competitive game, and I think that should be sort of stated just to make sure.
They have an emotional tie to them too, and I do want to get y'all's broader thoughts on this topic after, now that we kind of go through the intro for people unfamiliar. But these games have a very significant emotional resonance to them in a way that many other video games do not. Super Smash Bros. Melee is a 21-year-old game, or will be in a few weeks, and that is quite significant. That there is a seemingly hundreds of thousands at minimum number of people that still care about it in 2022. That doesn't happen. The emotional connection that people have to this is very unique. It's part of the reason you see the reactions in the way that you have. People are angry. I would say that anger has been misguided. People have been doxxed since this entire scandal happened, which is not okay. But the anger, the vitriol is totally understandable. So with that, Slime, Aiden, what are your broader thoughts on kind of where things stand now after like a week of mudslinging, more or less?
Aiden has thoughts and feelings. I personally I'm more of like a pundit at this point, because I don't have my like wrists kind of deep in the workings of tournaments and stuff. But I know all the stuff that Aiden knows, because we talk all the time and we hang out. We've worked together, and I worked at Beyond the Summit. I produced Smash events. Aiden's been doing that before he worked at Beyond the Summit. And so there's this like level of like, oh shit, what's going on now? Like, what's the war look like? Because let me tell you, this all happening right now with Alan, this is like in Game of Thrones when the Night King is like, I'm threatening everything. Because the war between BTS and like VGBC and whoever else wanted to step up and broadcast tournaments, because that's how revenue is generated, was a thing, right? It was competition. But this person came in and said, no, I'm taking everything away as far as what I've heard. And that's where this finally got like sort of exposed, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about kind of the levels of like onus here, and like who is actually at fault for like what part of it. I think there has been a lot of discomfort or problems with the way Panda tried to convince people to join their circuit over the course of from the original announcement to like all the planning and all the changes and like inconsistencies in messaging that they provided different TOs in order to make their circuit happen. I've kind of talked about how like I imagine Alan was in this really challenging place where after years of like slow discussion with Nintendo, he finally got the green light to like move forward with this circuit. This is how I imagine it playing out, by the way. Is like Alan at the end of 2020.
I just want to say you're right, by the way, and I won't share what happened in this conversation, but I can say myself, and I don't think anybody said this, that like it took Panda years, like at least 3+ to get Nintendo on board with this idea. I remember being at Genesis 2020 before the world fell apart during the pandemic, and going to an off-the-record drink with a representative from Nintendo and Alan. After the event, things shut down. I was done with my media work, and I was just like, I like went to go get a drink with him. And again, I'm not going to share the contents of the conversation because it was off the record, but like there was a Nintendo person at that drink, or at that social gathering, and I was sort of perplexed that someone was even there, that they even cared enough to be there. And so it did take them years. Anyway, continue. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a really slow moving company, right? And the way I see it is at the end of 2021, somebody at Nintendo was finally like, "Hey, this is a go. Announce this and get this going next year. We can do it." And Alan, with not a lot of time to put together this monstrosity of a task, has to now execute a circuit from the perspective of somebody who is not really a TO himself. And I would say, like, as someone who is like deeply ingrained in circles of organizers that like do communicate with one another and do execute events, Alan hasn't really been a part of that circle of people. So he's like calling upon a bunch of people relatively last minute to like activate this massive thing that, like, from Smash World Tour's perspective, they took at least a year in advance of the first one to like start planning a project like this. And Alan basically had a few months from like the announcement. So I do sympathize with the fact that he had what to me was like an almost impossible task, and probably from his perspective had to do whatever he could to try and like get it off the ground and have a successful year one, because Nintendo is so difficult and slow to work with that the opportunity, if you were to blow it, probably isn't going to come around again because of like how difficult managing a relationship with them could be. So that's kind of like the beginning of it to me. And then over the course of trying to convince people to get on tournaments, there is a lot of like stretching the truth, perhaps intentionally lying. We don't really know until like Alan or like maybe people from Panda answered questions. But to get people to join the circuit, like a really consistent thing that was told prior to the new Smash World Tour that got announced this year was that if Smash World Tour announces, they're going to be shut down immediately. They will not run next year, so come be a part of our circuit. And I can absolutely tell you that that was true, because that was messaging that was told to me and probably like dozens of other people. That was like, we were all convinced that Smash World Tour wasn't even going to happen this year because of stuff Alan was saying. And then all of a sudden Smash World Tour announces and moves forward, and it's something that you can be a part of. So there's this big question of like, well, why would like Alan like tell us the opposite? Like, what is that? Is that a lie? Is it a misunderstanding? Because that message was like so like hammered on for so long. It's weird that that's not the case. So now that leaves me like with an uneasy feeling, and other TOs with an uneasy feeling of like, well, what else that's been communicated to me like might not necessarily be true or consistent, and it doesn't like set a great like groundwork for wanting to work with them in like the coming year, right? And then on top of that, I think as some TOs, including Smash World Tour, as they noted in their statements, started going directly to Nintendo to seek licenses and have conversations with them. And upon having conversations with Nintendo, realized that there were more discrepancies between what Alan was telling them and what Nintendo was telling them. So it's an even worse look, because it now really does seem like Alan is not telling us the truth. Alan is like manipulating things or saying things in order to convince people to join the circuit. So now maybe from Alan's perspective, this is all in the right? This is justified because he sees a community-focused licensed circuit as the path forward for the community to be successful and to grow. I imagine Alan is not like a villain. He probably wants what's best for this scene that's he's been a part of for 15 years, and maybe it's also what like grows his company and like makes it successful in the long run. Like those two things can like be true. But as like the year progressed, I think we got to this point where like a lot of TOs didn't trust Alan. And that's why, if you look at the events that are a part of the Panda circuit, why so few events that have history in this community actually signed on to it. Like, I think the number one complaint about the Panda circuit was like, well, look at what it's composed of. It's like actually pretty barren in terms of like historical Smash events. Yeah. And it was filled with like last minute signifiers and like regionals that like don't have a lot of history. And that's something to note. Now, the match that's sorry.
Well, I was going to say, like, also during this process and before it, right? Imagine you're a TO of a big tournament that has been established for years, right? There's two things that Panda is coming at you with. One is that you are basically, when you're a TO, you're the belle of the ball, and all the broadcast companies will come to you and they're like, can you be on our channel? And like, and because that's how you get revenue, right? And to the level of which a company will break off a piece of their revenue to stream the tournament on their channel and let you like an interweave has been a thing for the past like 4 years. It's actually developed into, I believe, a pretty healthy relationship. And so when
by the way, a market that didn't exist before then and was created by Beyond the Summit, because they came in and were Beyond the Summit came in and were like, oh, you guys, like these streams, like these other streams don't pay you for the right to broadcast your event. In fact, it often happens the other way around for some reason.
You had to pay them to produce your tournament and they would keep all the revenue, right? This was a bad model that took advantage of tournament organizers, and I believe, I will argue, was corrected because of Beyond the Summit's involvement eventually into the tournament scene. And so you're a TO. You look very pretty. You're going to have a lot of top players at your tournament, and someone comes to you, but this is a new person, and they say it's going to be on this channel, and you're okay. Well, these companies can break us off this amount of revenue if we hit these numbers. What can you give? I don't know. What is Alan saying? Who knows? But he's also saying this will be part of a big.
We can give you an official Nintendo license, right? That, I guess that's like sort of the veil is like, well, we can make sure your shit doesn't get rocked. But to Aiden's point earlier, like, you know, when the shit has not been rocked for so long, 9 years,
things have been okay, right? But also, he says, or this person says, let's just call it Bamboo Global. They say it's going to be on a circuit. Doesn't that sound fun? And if you're a TO, you're like, no, it doesn't, because circuits have been tried before, and circuits didn't work out because they're mismanaged and they're weird. And and Aiden's laughing right now because of how close, but how far it would get sometimes. Circuits are not a good word to hear these days.
Also, where are the PM thoughts?
Bro, just let me find them. Let me watch Junebug cook.
Anyway.
Sorry. I wanted to clarify that as a perspective of a TO, because this is where the wars are being fought, right? In these calls with these organizers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is very much, it's a scene that is, I think Aiden summed it up pretty well earlier. It's a scene that has been left to its own devices for so long that it figured out its own devices, to your point, Slime. It figured out what made it kind of work. Again, break even is working. What sort of makes it work, and then now it's being disrupted by two different parties, Nintendo, who's being more hands-on, and Panda, who is coming in with sort of this official license and idea to sort of shake things up a little bit. And while I don't think initially I don't think that was ill-intentioned, I do think based off everything we've heard, it became that way.
What Panda and Nintendo like don't seem to understand, and I kind of glean this from like conversations over time of just like the general vibe, if you will, of Alan's sentiment about like the community growing it, what tournament organizers like were doing wrong, what is like wrong with the Smash landscape as a whole, and also just Nintendo's decision making is like this circuit and this shutdown coming in at a weird time where to me, I want to say isn't even like coincidental. Where the Smash scene without those parties has become surprisingly developed as far as their business goes. Like the ecosystem of Smash financially is stronger than it's ever been. And we're in a place where we weren't for a long time, where we have the capability to fund events and do interesting things for players. And like, there's just a lot more wealth to be spread around because like the actual business development of the scene has grown a lot in the last few years. And I think we have demonstrably shown that we have done a better job for ourselves than Nintendo and Panda are now coming in to like offer. And that was a big reason like why a lot of these TOs said no, because it was like really providing very little benefit to them. And also comes, it's a little, I'm trying to think of the word. Like I want to say aloof, but that's not that's not exactly what I mean. But it feels like they aren't taking into account like what we've managed to do, and off the tail of all the times in the past that Nintendo has like impeded the growth of the Smash community. So I think there were like some leaks that came out last year where a lot of the conversations behind the scenes that like a lot of people did know about, but the public never really knew, finally came to light. And that's the context that I think is like removed from a lot of this when we talk about it. Like if you're a new person coming fresh into this conversation, it might not seem as bad as it does to somebody who's close to it all, because we have the understanding in the context of how many times in the past Nintendo has tripped us up. So for you to come in late and be like, here's the keys to this beautiful licensed circuit, and you're gonna do great now if you just sign on, after we've done all this work for ourselves and after it's in spite of what you've done to us in the past, it's like, well, why would that make me want to work with you? You don't have to do the bare minimum like a company for a newer game might have to do. You have to go above and beyond to prove to me that this support is legitimate, for me to take you seriously and for me to trust you. And I don't think this circuit this year and the decisions Nintendo has made, not even the decisions Panda has made, prove to me in any capacity that I would want them involved in anything. And that's why I'm never going to go to a Nintendo licensed event again, because this is like the last straw. This isn't like, oh, this is happening in a vacuum, right? This is on the tail end of years of them fucking with the bag. And now they've done maybe the worst decision of them all. I've also stressed this really hard, is like, you know what would have been better than some corporate exec above the competitive team at Nintendo saying, let's shut this shit down? Just outcompete the circuit. Leverage your $50 billion company to just run a better circuit, and you would have won in a year anyway. Instead, you shot yourself in the foot. And that's because the guy making the decision, I am so confident, is so removed and disconnected from what any of this means to any of us. He probably doesn't give a shit. And he's just like, yeah, well, It doesn't have a license. Let's shut this down. And that's the problem. That's the problem. Yeah. That is the guy at Nintendo who gets to make the decisions, and why I will never want to work with them.
In addition, I want to say, like, so what? Just let's take a step out and zoom out, because people tend to not understand, which makes sense. The purpose of broadcast media is to sell advertising spots to monetize people watching your screen, right? That's yes. You might be like, wait, what? And it's like, yeah, no, for real. So that means selling ads, selling sponsorships. And if you have a circuit, which means you can package all of these tournaments together and you can get everyone to work together, and you can go to big company. I like to use Doritos a lot. You go to Doritos and you say, we can have Doritos at all, like 9 events with like 50,000 people watching the whole year. And they say, okay, here's $1 million, right? That's what you make a circuit for, is to get the attention of blue chip advertisers and then get a lot of money and hopefully break that off to everybody and spread that around, right? Now, the funny part is, if you have a circuit, right, you can easily leverage that. But we did that as a community, and I will say, I think the sales team Beyond the Summit worked their ass off. They did that, right? The Papa John's deal was done without a sort of like that sort of collective weird control. It was just people working together, you know?
And Nintendo didn't like it. Nintendo didn't like it, dude. That's the problem. We have done something so substantial and tangible to help ourselves. And they're like, It's like, you didn't wait for our 8-week response time to negotiate this deal with the ad agency, who already is impatient with you. It's because ad agencies are just like a nightmare to work with, right?
It is honestly, to your point, Aiden, it's like, it's this disrespect of the history, the scrappiness, you know, which is like truly meaningful, emotionally meaningful to every single person who's ever ran a tournament, a bootstrap tournament, is like, you know, these aren't overnight things. They're hard. They're emotional. They come with ups and downs where it feels like you're going to fail. And then they come with the highs of seeing it all put together. Right. And it's like, that truly means something to people. And to come in and say that we can do it and be better, it is disrespectful, truly. I mean, I do think, like,
especially when it is functionally worse. I think that's the irony. Is it's come over to our circuit for a worse deal,
and that's the ball pit from the Tumblr meetup,
right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that the thing is the other part too is that I look at this situation, trying to sort of speculate here about Nintendo and how some of these big companies work and with their IP. I think they saw someone as Panda as an opportunity that someone will do it for us, right? They'll figure it out. And while like Panda, before all of this, before the circuit launched in April or was announced in April, Panda did have cred in the fighting game community. to an extent.
Yeah.
Right. Like among players, etc. Like people consider them pretty highly regarded. They're one of the few fighting game specific organizations that have figured out how to make things like monetarily sound for the most part. They had some cred, but they didn't have that sort of tournament organizer cred, which is a whole different ball game.
It is
with a whole lot of other moving parts. It's a very difficult sum of parts to be able to put that all together. And so starting from everything, starting from square one, I think Nintendo was like, great, somebody else is going to do this for us. Wonderful. We don't have to, because if Nintendo, let's say, hypothetically, Nintendo was to start their own Smash circuit that they ran, it was first party organized, etc. They're going to have to lose probably hundreds of millions of dollars on it before it finally gets to any sort of level. And it may never get to any sort of level to become, making up its money. Right? Like if they were going to go put together the finale event or whatever else, right? Like, and they were going to do all of this work. It was going to cost them hiring. It was going to cost them a bunch of, sort of venue fees, organizing, all the different things that come with that. You guys run events, you know how this works. Like it's an expensive sort of amalgamation. And so to Nintendo, it's, hey, somebody else is going to do this for us. They'll eat the brunt of the cost. They'll figure out how it works economically. We don't have to deal with it. But then on the other side, like they chose the wrong person. They chose someone that didn't have,
and it's all about the people, right? It's not like you could just drop someone in and like, okay, run a tournament. Like it is such a specialized skill set that is built over years. And if you choose the wrong person, that's that.
One of the things I was thinking about is a consistent sentiment I have got from a lot of different TOs is that Alan assumed the easy part of all this would be getting the tournament organizers on board. He assumed that once he got through the hard part of getting the relationship with Nintendo settled, everybody would just say yes to be a part of this. And I think that is that is such a misstep in general. Like he clearly valued or put more time into developing the relationship with Nintendo than he ever did with the tournament organizers that like control and make the biggest events in our scene. And he came in as a party who isn't really like familiar, I would say less familiar with these people than he should be, and was like, trust me, come over and be a part of this thing. And then also through the process of that, communicating things that were inconsistent or just flat out untrue. And I think that is a giant, the irony of this is that one of the first serious circuit efforts done by Commissioner Blur, if you will, I would say failed for very similar reasons, where there was a definite lack of faith in his role as the commissioner. Like there are a ton of other reasons as to why that project failed. And I don't think it falls completely to him, but I think it's important to note that I think 2 years ago, somebody tried to do the exact same thing. And if you had been paying attention to the scene, or like were friends with the parties that were trying to contribute to that project at the time, it's like a case study that you could just look at and be like, what did they do wrong? And then you could figure it out for yourself. But it feels like a lot of the mistakes were actually surprisingly similar, just happening 2 years later, which is I don't know, which is pretty funny. It is
like from I think from Aiden's perspective particularly, it's really funny because he's just watching like Star Wars happen again, and it's like they're making the same movie. What the hell?
Force Awakens is just the same plot.
It's the same plot.
I was about to say it's the Force Awakens New Hope.
But it's like people,
the characters are recast, but the plot is not.
But it's people that didn't even see A New Hope, and they're like, "This movie's pretty cool, huh? Like electric swords. Like this is new, right?" And they're like, "What?" So
yeah, that's a good analogy. So I have some other questions about non-Smash stuff towards the end, but I will ask something Smash related here. In the wake of this, the Smash World Tour shut down. A ton of the players said that they would not be going to Panda Cup. They withdrew. They obviously, like you all, considered it to be bad faith. Yeah,
like non-Smash players are like, you know what? We stand together. They also know it's like probably a good PR move, but it's still nice to see.
Oh, sure. But there are, I mean, in a scene where dollars are so important, I admire the people who are getting the hell out of this, because it takes some real balls in a world where like you got to pay rent next month, right? And for some of those competitors, this was the best opportunity they had to make considerable income, right? And so like, I respect the gumption for the people that got out. But my point being, a bunch of people withdrawing from Panda Cup, and you all, the two of you, Aiden on the event organizing side and Slime on the management side, and Ludwig, who y'all work with, announced that you were doing the Scuffed World Tour, which would be a Smash World Tour makeup event funded by you all, and you now have 2 weeks to put this damn thing together. What's that going like? Just to start basic.
You know what's fun is that the three of us in this call, we all found out at the same time in the same way. Isn't that cool? Aiden?
He gave you a heads
apparently,
up.
I was about to say, apparently Aiden got a heads up.
I didn't know. That's big for him.
He asked me if it was possible before, and I said yes. So that is why I knew about it the day before. But that's progress. If I may.
I often call Ludwig, he's like a Charizard, but you traded the Charizard to yourself early in the game, and he doesn't listen to you. Like, sometimes he'll do Flamethrower, and he'll destroy Brock, but sometimes he's like, I don't do that. And he's hard to tame. So,
yeah.
So how is it going, bud?
Yeah, we can start with the fact that Slime is not working on the project. At least at the moment, until I
haven't been brought in, but
I gotta do some delegation here. But
I'm ready, Captain. Tell me what I gotta do.
It's going. You want to figure casters out for me?
Maybe
not say that. Now you're gonna get a bunch of DMs because I said it in public.
Broadcast, run a show, all that.
Slime is the official caster. Send your highlight reels, your casting reels to Slime, please.
If you haven't already, that's right.
But I think the main thing that's exciting about this, and something that I really praise everybody in our small company for, and Ludwig perhaps above all else as the person who pushes these things forward, is we have probably the most like flexibility and mobility in esports and the influencer space, because one guy just has to say, we should do this, it'd be cool, let's get this done in 2 weeks. And we have a team of people who we might sigh a little, but we're like, we're gonna do this shit. And we know
what we're doing, and we want to do it, and that's the fun part, you know.
Because I think honestly, there's like so few parties that are like have kind of like the resources to turn something like this around, and I kind of indulge in that fact. It's like, you know what, we can put like this, we can fly out 32 players from all around the world and host like a finals equivalent, in 2 weeks. I mean, less than 2 weeks now, but it's in progress. Getting all the players and like flights confirmed this week. We have 16 people for each game. Luckily, when Ludwig makes a big announcement like this, it gets a lot of, traction and eyes, which means a lot of people like reach out to help, which is very cool too. Because I think it's seen as like a community effort in its own way. And I'm not fearful of the execution. I was a little fearful of the money we'd have to spend to do it, but even that isn't looking terrible right now, because we figured out a venue and all that stuff. So it's very exciting. And I do take a lot of pride in the fact that, one, Ludwig is willing to make decisions like this, and two, the rest of our team is capable of turning something like it around in that time. It's just very cool. It makes me happy, even if I'm a little stressed inside.
Yeah, we make it happen, man. I think it's just, I mean, me and Aiden also, we would put together summits and stuff like that, which has a lot more lead time. But like there's definitely fires that we were forged in individually, and like this doesn't scare us. We just know that we gotta we just gotta lift the heavy weight, So
I want to ask you all a broader question about working with Lud, because he was on the show and he talked a little bit about Mogul Moves and sort of the way that it's set up. Since he was on the show, he launched Offbrand, which is a separate company that does. When I explain the two things to each other, I go, Mogul Moves is the Ludwig company, and Offbrand is the company that is co-owned by Ludwig, co-founded by Ludwig, that does stuff for other people, right? Like, do you think that's an accurate sum of the two?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that is basically it.
Yeah.
Got it. Do you want elaboration or?
Yeah, sure. Explain.
I think that the difference between Offbrand's job is to be the bridge between influencers and advertisers, using both like of those facets of the industry to bring together events, and then use third-party broadcast companies to do the thing. Basically, get Doritos to do something with XQC and then make that happen. Because influencers are, I used to call them lazy, and some of them are, but they're also really busy. And I genuinely believe that they're busy. They don't have business acumen. And that's sort of like, it's off-brand is like a grease. They're just greasy guys, and they grease everything up and make deals happen. And Mogul Moves is Ludwig's. Basically, it's everything that he wants to do as projects, and from big events to videos and stuff like that. And we are the scaffolding that holds him up while he streams and brings in the revenue to keep everything running.
Yeah,
and that's it.
This year y'all have done a lot of stuff, be it launching bidets or launching launched, for those unfamiliar, launched an entire bidet line called Swipe Bidets. You've ran events like the Smash Invitational that you were in charge of, Aiden, a couple months ago. It's been a busy year for you all, especially coming out of the pandemic and being able to do more in-person stuff. And as he said on this podcast a few months ago, having YouTube's comically sized bag of money to at your disposal, so that you have the ability to invest in these other things. And so clearly,
yeah, dude, we got
a lot of moving parts.
We got a Series A without the board. It's like the dream.
Yeah, it's insane. And boy, does our burn rate crazy.
You got the Series A without having to sell any equity, basically. Like you're just like, here you go, YouTube, just cut us a revenue check. It looks nice.
It's fucking sick. And I think that's how Ludwig pitched it to them, honestly. Like, my understanding when Ludwig was like meeting with them is like, are you down to lower my like required streaming hours per month so that I put this budget towards making interesting events and projects that basically no other person in the space is like willing to do? And YouTube was like, yeah, that sounds dope. So a big shout out to the people who like figured that out and like kind of believed in that. I think Lester was in here earlier. If he's not,
I was about to say, you were insulting him earlier,
yeah.
Slime.
Oh, really?
But
is that like a look, Lester? You got to change the name. It's just a weird name.
But I think that's a really cool thing. Is like we're like I said, I think we're in a very, very unique position where like most companies and groups of people either do not have the capital to make decisions like we do, or suffer from so many levels of bureaucracy where they simply cannot make decisions on the timeline that we can. We didn't have to go, like, we didn't have to sit through a bunch of fucking all hands meetings to decide to do Scuffed World Tour. Ludwig called me, asked, do you think hosting this at this date is possible? I said yes, and then Ludwig announced it. Like, that's the timeline for figuring it out. And
that's also not to say like we don't spend a lot of time in the kitchen making more like rolled out things or planning in advance. It's just like Ludwig has always wanted to be agile, and part of working for him and with him is like, fuck yeah, let's do it.
There's kind of like two types of projects at Mogul Moves, I would say. There's the projects that have a lot, like the big ideas that like aren't tied to like a date or like an event in like culture, and we get to plan them out and execute when we want to. Like the Smash event is a better example of that, where it was like a lot of months of lead time. Or we have a Valorant event coming up in January that has been in the works for a while. And that's something exciting. We have a much more appropriate timeline for putting something of that scale together. Whereas like some other projects, right, like this one we're working on right now, is like capitalizing on a moment. And I think that's the idea, is like, can we like take this moment and turn it into something exciting, build a headline out of it? And I think that's what Ludwig looks to activate.
Well, I wanted to ask you all about the kind of what you were talking about a little bit earlier, Slime, in that answer, which was the spinning up a business, sophisticating content creation in a way that I don't think it has been in this type before. Let's call it like the creator empowerment movement, for lack of a better term.
Don't give them that much, man. They need less power. No, I see what you're saying. I'm messing around.
No. But we had Hutch on this podcast a couple months ago, and he was talking about like, how he was paying like $50,000 a year by Machinima or whatever, while he was like, his YouTube channel was like bringing in millions of views every single month, right? Like, that's not fair to the poor guy. Like, fuck, that sucks.
Right.
He was being taken advantage of. Whereas this is like the inverse. This is sort of the creator, like, sort of driving the ship in what they want to do, and then building up a business unit around them, whether it be the two of you, whether it be someone like Nick Allen, who has a very deep professional background,
The GOAT.
being able to
not that deep. Not that deep. Hasn't even done that much, honestly.
The GOAT.
Yeah. Okay. Well, back to Slime's point, giving me shit for being the League of Legends guy. I'll contest that one. As someone who's been on the other end of the phone calling Nick Allen for comment on Riot Games ventures, I will contest that. But yeah. So you guys like building up a business unit around it. And I want to talk about that specifically, sort of that sophistication, being able to do that in that different way, because very few creators have done it. They may have a manager, they may have an agent, whatever else. They may have, small staff that works on their YouTube videos, YouTube editing, but it's not like you all where it's this sort of, you have a director of marketing, you have yourself running events, Aiden, et cetera. Like you have staff that is not the traditional type of staff that works under a content creator. Very few have done that.
The difference, I think, is that we just come from a professional background, which is beyond the summit, and Ludwig just poached all of us. And in addition, Aiden, which was running tournaments at 19 years old that 1,000 people would come to. Like, he has just selected a team that has worked at a larger scale than most creators, and we just know what we're doing enough to like execute. I don't think we're the goats. I think Aiden actually is kind of like the goat at TOing. I would never admit that to him. I'll take you down after this a couple pegs, but
no, it's okay.
It's more shut the fuck up. I'm talking, and so it's more like it's. I think that's just the big difference, right? And most influencers kind of like fell into it. I feel Ludwig always, not that Ludwig's like that different. But he had this ambition, and I think he always was setting himself up for the next step while he was doing the current step. And now he's just at this point where he can do things he wants with agility. And part of it was making sure that his support staff can understand that and do that.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I think about even when I met him for the first time at an event. God, I don't even remember what year it was. A while ago. Smash something. And it's very clear even before the fame that it was thinking about what happens when the fame comes. Even years before it actually did. Before the fame and the money showed up, thinking about like, well, what happens when I get it? Right? So it's like this like long-term thinking that I think a lot of the creators just don't have. The creators that I interact
with
don't have.
There's two things. One, off-brand is like his escape hatch to become a normal human being and not have to push out videos and end up on a Sunny V2 video about how he fell off and still be involved in an environment he loves. And I think that's like an insane amount of foresight that a lot of people don't have. Also, it's a measurement of ambition. I think there's your Ibais and your Germas and your Kais and your Ludwigs of the world that really just like and Point Crow also too. They really just want to do the next big thing. They want to take a step further. And some content creators don't. Like some content creators want to flip on the game, play it for 9 hours straight, turn off the game, and that's okay too. But that ambition requires work and it requires support, and you can't just spin it up. So it's just like a natural progression of what he wanted was hiring people to help him.
I want to talk about something that's I've had my own experiences with this year, and it's tough. And it's working with friends. You guys host the Yard, co-host the Yard with Lud and with Falco, and y'all together broadly. I was listening to the most recent episode, and there was a joke that Lud made that it was like, I do this to make my friends rich. And, if somebody without the context of the relationship of the four of you would be like, yo, man, that guy's an asshole. But like totally, obviously it's a joke, and there's context and depth there. But it is hard when you disagree with someone that like you're friendly with otherwise, and both of you all started as his friends, not as his employees. And so I want to ask you about that, the working with friends and how it changes the dynamic of things.
I imagine our answer is going to be pretty similar.
Aren't we just goated, Aiden? We communicate with each other, and when there are problems, we figure it out. And Ludwig's actually extremely easy to kind of work with. He has this problem where he doesn't communicate when he does have problems, and he just tries to fix it quietly, which we've tried to draw out of him. I bought a Sibian. Do you know what a Sibian is, Jacob Wolf?
I do not.
You don't?
Please elaborate.
So a Sibian, Jacob Wolf, is an electronic sex machine that you sit on and you put inside of you, and it vibrates at just neck break speeds.
It vibrates fast.
It's as fast as can be.
If you were close enough to it, you might mistake it for a jackhammer outside your room.
And so I bought this Sibian, and I used like his company money instead of like yard money, and it was just like this issue that I didn't really understand was a problem, because it's an expensive sex machine, Jacob. It's like $3,000 for a Sibian, for a good one, and I wanted to get a good one, and I just
you
bought
wouldn't
it
want
for
a bad Sibian.
Would you want a bad Sibian? No, you want the Maserati of Sibians. And
if
I
it's
bought
going,
it for a gag.
if it's going somewhere, you wouldn't want it to be bad.
I bought it for a gag on the show, and it was this thing, and it was like probably one of our biggest conflicts. He was like, "Oh, you should be using like yard money for that." I'm like, you know what, you're right. And I think about it, but like as far as like things like that, I think we really are good at problem solving and care about each other, and there's no ego. You know what I mean? Like we all care about we all know our strengths, we know our weaknesses, and we work together. And that's, I think, why we're also friends, right? The drama is kept to a minimum because we talk.
I think that's basically, I think we're all very good about being candid and communicative with each other. Like we're very upfront about our like personal problems as well as like our problems related to work, and find a way to like work through them generally, and also kind of have this unique shared ambition in different ways. I think we're almost lucky in a way where like all of us sort of have this like different area of like expertise that was like applicable to what Ludwig wanted to do, and we all have similar values in terms of like why we want to accomplish things and what we want to do in the space, and also like how we communicate those things to others. And it's so I don't feel like there's ever been like a heavy tension in that regard, because this question's come up more than once, and I'm always surprised by like how easy it is in a way.
The most me and Aiden have ever fought has not been about work. It was about, he took
Melee.
my green tea. Oh, Melee.
Oh, it was
but
the
you also
green
took
tea.
my tea. And
Yeah.
I literally almost fought him with my actual hands. And that had nothing to do with work. It had everything to do with him being just uncompromisingly evil.
There was okay, bought you a replacement one. Anyway, green teas aside, I think something that also really helped is like the base, like this core group of people, if you want to call like the four of us that, although like at this point the company extends like far beyond like our group. We had all worked together before. Like pretty much all of us were coworkers except for Ludwig. With already there were instances where like prior to us leaving Beyond the Summit, Ludwig would like rope us into things somehow, be like, can you help me with this? Can you do this for me? I'll pay you like this contractor fee to like just do this one thing. So there was a lot of like groundwork for whether or not it would be a good idea. And it's pretty much stayed that way. Like I think, you know, our friendship is like fundamentally very similar to how it was before. I don't think the company has like drastically changed a lot of it, other than the fact that we all just have more to do. I think we're all busier than we used to be. But that's, I don't know, that's about it.
And one last note in the yard, Ludwig has admitted that he created a monster, because me and Nick and Ludwig lived together, just us, way back when me and Nick started at BTS. And then we always talked about just doing a podcast. Like we're all in the house, you know, we're funny. We are, it's just the literal, oh, we should start a podcast thing. We talked about it for years. And then finally Ludwig was like, let's get this going. Let's do it. And he gave us a deadline. And then we did it, and it became a monster. And we make way more money as like employees through the podcast. And he said like, I can no longer get you guys to do things because the podcast is so big. And I was like, don't ever talk to me like that ever again, you dumb piece of shit. Like that's not why we're doing this. It's not because like you're paying us. It's because we like what we do, and that's never going to really change. Right. And so I think it was reassuring for him to hear that's like, no, bro, it's not like that. Like the bread's good, but we also want to make tournaments and broadcasts and stuff.
Yeah, I want to do something cool. That's what like I said earlier, like this is an incredible opportunity to not only work with my friends, but also to turn things around that I think like nobody else really can in this space right now. And that's very exciting to me. Like I'm ultimately very happy that this is my position at the end of the day.
The hustle of y'all's entire group is impressive, I must say, because like I met a lot of you, or at least like rubbed shoulders when it was not what it is now, I met like Nate very early on to his time at Genji. I met Brandon very early at his time at Twitch, right? And I met Lud when he was unemployed, or at Best Buy and then unemployed. and then like where that is now, all these years later, as creators, as a company, etc. It's very cool to see. So give yourself all props as a group. So it is deserved. I want to ask you about what's next, because I'm sure it's something y'all think about all the time. Not literally, right? But obviously you mentioned the Valorant thing y'all are working on, Aiden, a couple different times. You've got the Scuffed event here in 2 weeks, the Smash makeup event, and you, if I'm correct, just bookended the yard for the end of this year, at least. Not totally, but did its thing, and are y'all taking it off over the next couple of weeks? Is that right?
We're actually going to film this week's episode like a couple hours after this.
Yeah, you are going to be. We're gonna roast the shit out of you for half an hour straight, nonstop quips. Do you understand, Jacob?
Go ahead. No, I don't remember. I don't remember. Yo, yeah. Hey,
he didn't even know what a Sibian was.
That's
okay. In the context of the last time that you roasted the shit out of me, Slime, I want to give you the context of what was happening in my life.
What happened
when that happened? So
I don't even remember.
So in December, the last time I was roasted by Slime was on a podcast. Was December of 2016. I did not remember it until he said something today, and because what happened the month prior and the month and a half prior was so fucking egregious that I just like blanked out for the rest of the year. So I reported that the second biggest League of Legends team in the world was breaking up, despite Riot asking me not to, despite the team asking me not to, and I fucking did it anyway because I'm a reporter, I'm a journalist. It's my goddamn job.
That's so sick.
And you know what? I had everyone shit on me. I had Reddit people fucking doxing my address and publishing my old address. I had like people sending me back on Skype fucking malware to try to get my IP address. Like, this shit was fucked. I had the second winningest team, whatever, most popular team in the world, behind only SKT, is the only one more popular than they were. And they're out here like calling me a liar, calling for my fucking job. Riot revokes my credential for an event, and I go anyway. And so that was a month and a half prior to you shitting me on a podcast.
And then we just made fun of you because alongside making fun of Bowser in Melee, like, we don't know.
Yeah, so I was just like, you know what?
In the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just like, you know what? Nothing can break me. None of this Smash Brothers shit can break me. Fuck y'all. There you go. There's my esports persona.
You're all right.
Anyway.
You're all right.
All right. So we do have a question. We have a lot of questions. This one is from Luis Danexor.
All right. Hey, Aiden, Slime, big Melee fan for almost a decade and fan of y'all's previous work at BTS. 2 questions. First, when it comes to impromptu Smash events, Ludwig has had this year and will have the Scuffed World Tour. How difficult is it from a production point of view to create an amazing experience for not only the players, but the fans too, in such a quick turnaround?
$1 million question, quite literally there, actually, that last one.
Yeah, so right.
Go for it. The both of you. Yeah.
Okay, real quick. It's the players making a great event for viewers and players. Players are easy. You just got to take care of them. Make sure they're okay. Make sure they're taken care of. Make sure they're fed. All that. Make sure they like the format. They're going to whinge. They're going to cry. They're going to try to change their seating, but you just hold strong. You say, no, we won't check the disc, Juan. We won't do it. And for as far as a broadcast, it just needs to be clean. Make sure the audio is good. This is not something we particularly like. Most of the things we do is we outsource to companies like BTS or whatever to handle the literal production, the cables and the buttons of putting something on the screen. But yeah, go ahead, Aiden.
Yeah, I think timeline-wise, the biggest stressors, production-wise, are on the like boots on the ground, people planning it. Somebody like Juna, who might be like the director of an entire broadcast production at an event, and planning that all out, getting all the equipment, either to the venue, like whether you're renting or own that, need to ship it across the country, getting your staff planned out for it. All of those like components. Oh, and the graphics package, like getting a whole graphics package done and designed in time. Those are probably some of the biggest stressors for this event coming up, because it's just like those things just naturally take a lot of time. And when you try to condense that into a short period, it can be rather difficult. It also depends on like the scale and like spectacle of the broadcast. Like naturally, if you're watching Smash tournaments maybe like 7 years ago, or especially if you're watching Smash tournaments 10 years ago, right? Most of those productions were done by one person with one PC, and it was a super bare bones, simple setup. And honestly, when people were getting into it back then, like when the wave of like doc kids was coming in, I don't even think a lot of people like cared or thought about it, because like the gameplay and the players on the screen are like the biggest priority of them all. Now, like as time has passed, there's definitely expectations for like what a broadcast needs to look like, and how it flows. How like, you know, does the audio work? Is the gameplay audio like desynced from something? Do the caster mics suck? Like obviously there is a higher standard now than there used to be, but I think at the end of the day, like it is compared to something like, say, like a Counter-Strike, the broadcasts are a little more bare bones just by the nature of the game than something like that. And so that makes it easier to spin something up on a time period like this. Because like if we were trying to put together a Counter-Strike tournament with 6 teams on like this timeline, it might actually be impossible. But because like at like a Smash broadcast in its simplest form is 2 people sitting down at a single setup that is plugged into Slippy like replay capturing that you then do like a window capture of in OBS, and maybe you have like a webcam to show the players. That's like the simplest version of what you could do. And on a timeline like this, you could always spin something like that up. Now, how many like bells and whistles you want to add on to that, and how well you want to execute that, and how much polish your broadcast has, I think that's more dependent on like what your event is supposed to communicate. And
so,
that
but when you call it the Scuffed World Tour, you kind of set yourself up for any expectation you want.
Exactly.
And that's a mogul move.
Exactly. And part of the reason why this event is even possible is because I think like the broadcast could be a little shoddy at the end of the day, which I don't expect it to be based on the people who are helping us and are in charge of that. But what I am saying is like, I think people give you a lot of like leeway and give you a lot of goodwill because when they take things like the timeline and the intention of the event into account.
As far as monetization, so the way these big companies work, most companies they allocate their marketing budget like before the end of the year for the next year. So that's why sales is tough, because you have to establish multi-year relationships to be able to be like, okay, can we get this for next year, and then they allocate that to you. However, sometimes at the end of the year they realize they have to dump their marketing budget, because if they don't spend it all, then they won't get as much the next time. So they're incentivized to. That's why you'll see shit like Mango's birthday bash. It's like, you know, they're trying to dump money, I would assume.
Or what was the other event Blur ran? The Twitch Christmas one, like the
Twitch Christmas party,
2 years before
bro.
that. Yeah, where do you think that money came from? So the budget's got to get spent somehow.
Budget's got to get spent. They don't want less. So it depends, but you definitely don't want to be in that spot where you're kind of hoping that someone just swings in from the rafters. Luckily, Ludwig has a lot of connections and clout, right? He can call up Mr. Beast and be like, hey, any bars? And that's a big advantage.
Yeah. I think the sales aspect, like you're asking like how these things, especially invitationals, right, where we don't have ticket revenue, like something like this is not going to sell open tickets, and ticket revenue is probably the biggest stream of revenue for most Smash majors still. Like until we have a more developed sponsorship ecosystem, which, you know, is kind of a work in progress, ticket sales are like what moves the needle for most major tournaments. But we're in a unique spot where I think like the Ludwig Smash Invitational, which notably struggled because a sponsor backed out last minute, could have performed better from a sales perspective and a profitability perspective if that timeline to plan it had been longer, because we're not necessarily looking to plan events on the timeline of whether or not we can do sales or not. We're just fitting them in as like Ludwig wants to do them. And I do think as we kind of age as a company, our approach to these things will have to like be a little more refined. But when we're in this first year of this like YouTube money boost, we kind of have the privilege to make decisions in a little bit more of a risky way. It's very like it's like accepted that we will lose money on an event like that, because that's what the money was for. That's why Ludwig signed with YouTube initially, was to use that money to fund projects like this, ignoring the sales aspect of it. Now we'll have to come around and see where the fucking chickens roost eventually. But for the time being, this is like an okay approach for us, and we're not even like, and that's keeping in mind that sales continue to happen. So I think like that clip, I say like we lost $200,000, which was the estimate at the time. We actually ended up losing like 110K, 120K, so it's less than what I corrected. Because of the last minute sponsorships that we did bring into that project. And I expect as our timelines get a little more developed and our company becomes a little more structured and we get away from this year one of the YouTube deal, that we will have more sponsors for these projects that we plan. So that's kind of like the way that I see it, at least.
Our next question is going to be from Tanner Griffith, who is also here to speak.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. I just wanted to ask sort of a two-part question here. I wanted to know what your guys' thoughts were about the vision of the future of Smash. What does a perfect world look like where there's Smash tournaments? Do you see Smash World Tour coming back next year? And as well, too, do you see a future where two circuits can coexist? Or does this put a bad taste in a lot of organizers' mouth moving forward?
So as far as the two circuit question goes, I actually think two circuits is perfect in a weird way. I thought we were in such a great position as a community with both of them existing because it forced them to compete with each other. There were already instances of like people saying no to one circuit and like and yes to the other because of what one circuit was able to offer, or their like trust in the operations of the other circuit. And there was this weird kind of unique time where three parties, the Smash World Tour, BTS, and Panda, were competing for TO's attention and giving them offers to like integrate them into like their business. And having multiple circuits means that like one of the big problems that I have with this shutdown, whether or not like I honestly don't, I believe Panda and Alan when they say they didn't know that Nintendo was going to make that call. One of the big problems with the whole thing, regardless of whether they knew or not, is Nintendo, instead of out-competing the other circuit, like they certainly could have done, decided to shoot the competition down instead, which is like a big issue to me. And if we had two for the next few years, forcing each one of them to like bring more to the table to keep TOs involved, that only benefits the community in my eyes. And we just only get more Smash to watch as well. There is some degree where like saturation becomes a problem, and we can kind of see that, I think, in like Counter-Strike has had issues with like too many people at the table, and it's a little hard to keep track of. But ultimately, two circuits would have been a better scenario for the community. I think an ideal version of the future now, I'm not sure if Smash World Tour is going to come back and like give it another shot. I really have like no clue, but I think the best version of the circuit we could have is there's some third-party commissioner that the TOs trust that is not attached to a particular company or brand that has like stake in the space. And then the TOs are a co-op that like operate each of their individual events in agreement of it being a circuit. And like something like the BTS sales department gets to sell across it. And part of the budget for every tournament that is raised through sales is allotted to fly like a portion of top players out to like each totem pole event across the year. And then the finals should be Genesis, in my opinion, because it takes our finals out of this weird November, December like window where every other esports finals is. We position ourselves in like January instead. It's already our most important, biggest event. And there's sort of a natural off season after Genesis ends, I would say, where generally there aren't really any like super large tournaments in February. And then like March doesn't hit its stride until usually like the end of March when like Collision happens. So I think that would be a great model of what we could do in the future, is basically the totem pole TOs get together and agree to like operate somebody with the help of like some sort of third party that has no reason to like fuck anybody over. And we have like a circuit that's sort of runs itself, so to speak. Undoubtedly needs staff and support and things like that. But I think instead of forcing a pop-up of like a brand new event to be the finals, or like creating new events and trying to like pack the schedule full of things, I think that's a much better direction to go in.
Yeah, I'm sad to say my thoughts are we're going to go from having 2 circuits to 0 circuits in 2023 as a Super Smash Brothers community. I think SWT got the word, read subliminally between the lines, and Panda Cup is not going to have all that much goodwill if it even tries to continue.
Yeah, I think I didn't get to bring this up earlier, but I think an important point that I wanted to kind of finish off what I was saying when like Panda was struggling with all these communications with the TOs, and like TOs were having issues with that. I think all of that could have happened, and like this Panda BTS thing could have happened, and nothing would have come of it other than the fact that people still wouldn't have wanted to work with the Panda circuit long run. But Nintendo choosing to shut down the Smash World Tour is like the match. It's like, okay, well, now we have to take a stand because we've actually lost something. And I think that's important to say. It's like, even if Panda was like removed from that decision that was actually made, it's like these two parties are in a joint venture, and we've now lost something that's like very tangible in the community. So now it's like, well, we weren't going to say anything about these problems that we had with the Panda circuit before because it didn't matter. We had an alternative. We had a path. Like, we could either run unlicensed events or potentially license our events if we wanted to, independently with Nintendo and not Panda's involvement. And now all of a sudden a whole tour has been shut down. So it's like, now we have to act. Now I have to like make a statement like, I don't want to go to the Panda Cup or Panda events anymore because of the decision that Nintendo made.
Yeah, and I think, even if everyone's here and it's like, well, they didn't actually shut us down, they didn't send us the cease and desist, it doesn't matter. Like, they dared them, and you can't, like, when you're BG Bootcamp and the like you can't just be like, yeah, we'll eat the cost to defend ourselves against Nintendo legally. Like, the even if the nuance is different than what we currently know, it doesn't matter. The decision is the same. You're not going to fight a legal battle against Nintendo. Like, even if they didn't send you the letter, just say, shut the fuck down, basically. Like, that. Yeah, I think that's important too, because the communication is on all sides. It's been awful in the wake of this. Like, it's bad. Yeah.
And there's more to come, Jacob Wolf.
I know.
Like a Sibian, it just keeps giving and giving and giving, and eventually Alan.
The switch is on. The switch is on, and nobody's flipping it.
We still have to wait on Alan's statement, which is interesting, but we'll see. The question is, we don't know. We'll see. We know Aiden laid out a beautiful vision of the world, vision of a better world that who knows what will happen.
Yeah. The next question we had, I don't know if they're going to come up to ask it. They've been invited. If not, I will read. Is from, I think it's Mopu, and I'm sorry to tell
Mapu.
you, or Mapu. I'm pretty sure that's an anime profile picture.
No, they're fine. We have a history, and I'm so glad to field this question.
Listen, I have an important question. I have some guesses as to how you guys will answer, but I thought I'd ask anyway. So I'm more curious about the content question. I don't know if I think you might have skipped over that particular word in my question, but I wanted to know if you guys could like change the trajectory of both like Melee as a scene and also like the content space of Melee, what would you change?
It's hard because I tend to think most Melee content is just not that great. And I think esports content in general has been taking a nosedive because it's not as novel as it used to be. I think about like old, like, again, BTS. I came up watching like Summit 2, and they started filming sketches for the first time, and it was like this really interesting thing. And now I feel like I don't know what people want. I don't know what they want to watch as far as content that isn't gameplay. And to be honest, I think it's all, I resent a lot of it because it's like not funny, and that's really all I care about. So I guess I'm the wrong guy to ask, but I do think that a more quality over quantity is what I would prefer, but I know that's not what pays the bills. There was that recent the production people that did they're called Action Esports. They did a JMOOC documentary. I thought it was really well done. And I think Walt is on the cusp of doing some good stuff, but Walt also feels like he needs to pump it out, which you do to make a living. So it's a weird spot, but I'm angrily agnostic about Melee content and Smash content.
I have a thought on this actually, just broadly about esports content, and it's interesting to have the two of you here when I to share this take. I think esports has a truly awful, as a whole, and I say any competitive gaming where competition is the main focus, not sort of whatever, if you want to divide yourself from, league or whatever. I mean, collectively, they all have storytelling problems to a certain degree. When the competition is the primary focus of the people that are seen the most on broadcasts, etc., right? Which it is to be good at these games and to win at these games. It is really hard for these people to be really compelling personalities. A lot of it's just not in them. I think that actually Smash is very lucky that some of its best players are also big personalities. People like Mango, people like Hungrybox, etc.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like it's lucky that those two things are kind of naturally blended, somewhat out of necessity, because those guys at one point had to do those things to be able to make money and to put a roof over their heads. Not so much anymore because they're so big and things are good for them now. But when I think more broadly about all competitive video games and the competition scenes, we have a real problem with the ability to tell stories to people that don't care about the games themselves. So if you don't care about Smash, if you don't care about League, if you don't care about whatever else, it doesn't matter to you how good somebody was at a Shine. What matters to you is the sort of the story of that person, the personality.
It's everything, yeah. And that's why the documentary was
and
so
y'all,
big.
Right, exactly. The documentary hit a bunch of things, but it's funny because like y'all are a part of the wave, I think, and Lud is a part of the wave where it became less about the video games and it became more about the people. Right? So much that like when QD was on this Correct. And so much to the point where like when QD was on this podcast 2 weeks ago, she was just like, I turn on video games, all my streamers or like all my viewers go away. Like she starts playing. She's like, I do it at the end of my stream so I don't kill my stream count. Right. And that's new. That's novel. That's changing. That's what's been happening over the past 2 years or so. The shift from sort of competitive gaming to on Twitch, etc., to personality.
Yeah, that's actually how Atrioc summed up Off-Brand. I was like, why are you doing this, bro? Why do you want to keep working with influencers? They're fucking miserable. And he goes, and then he said, this is like the new thing. This is the turning point, and I want to be in on it, and I believe in it.
He's right.
And
he's right.
That was annoying to hear from him because I don't
like
on the
him. Money.
I'll say it.
We have another question. Let's see if he'll take my invite, or if he'll take the invite from Prime. From this little known guy named Nick had a question for Aiden.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey guys, huge fan of the hashtag Visionaries podcast. First time asking a question, so please go easy on me. Anywho, my question for Aiden: why do you go and buy pho? Like, why do you get it to go? But then when you come home, you like put it in one of our ceramic bowls, and then you put it in the sink, and then it makes more dishes. Because it feels like to me, if you're gonna get to go food, you would eat it in the to-go packaging because that's kind of the convenience of it. You pay the premium for that, but then you still make more dishes, and sometimes you don't even do them the same day. So it's like, can you help me understand a little bit of your rationale? And I appreciate you taking my question.
It's a great question, Nick. Thank you for calling in.
Don't say it's a great question. It's a great
question. Aiden, you want to handle this one?
This is rich coming from the king of not doing dishes. This is I won't be.
I think I found the friendship tension working with your friends.
I think I found the dish front. Also, the answer's simple. The answer's so simple. Okay, the packaging that they put your pho in is too small to eat out of. If you pour all the ingredients into the bowl that they give you, it overflows. You can't eat out of it. So you have to move it to a different, bigger bowl so it doesn't spill everywhere. I think that is a fair answer.
May I suggest in the future you don't wash the bowl at all. You keep it in your room and you keep using it like a cast iron pan.
Yeah.
And you get all the delicious seasonings of the pho from years past.
And I'll
from
drink out of it
Christmases
too.
past.
I'll drink water and milk out of it when I'm not eating out of it.
I'm sure it's that's sanitary. I'm sure. Yeah.
Great question, Nick.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys listening.
Okay, man. It's over now. Just get the fuck out of here, man.
Much, guys. Thank you so much, guys. I'm happy you guys were here.
He was spamming laugh to I saw the space. He was spamming laugh react emojis.
Love the grief. Thank you. I think you answered my question of the where working with friends, the tension between each other. Thank you, Nick, for doing my job for me and bringing out the real tension here with dirty bowls in the dish in the sink.
Yeah, Aiden's just a fucking asshole. We all know this. I almost fought him over taking my stuff one time. It's a work in progress.
Can I add to the content question?
Sure.
I think you did a really good job of answering that. I think you pretty much nailed it with the idea of getting people to care about a storyline in a game they don't play. It's kind of like when I think something that people who make Melee content really don't understand is when you post a video that says Fiction did what to Leffen? It's like, well, who the fuck's Fiction and who's Leffen? Why do I care about this conflict as a person who plays Guilty Gear or Counter-Strike? I think people are really bad at generalizing content enough to open it up to a broader audience. Like, you kind of have to think when you post something on YouTube, like, how many layers of friction am I adding to this? So it's like, okay, how Falco multi-shine invalidates Yoshi. It's like, if that's your video title, it's like, okay, so you're appealing only your max amount of audience, people who are interested in that topic, are Melee viewers. If you got every person who watches Melee content on YouTube to watch your video in one day, you'd probably still get less than a Ludwig video on that video if every single person watched it. So you have to kind of think about, like, well, how many people am I translating the outside of my content, which is the title and thumbnail, to like the average person? And then when they actually get into the video, I think there's a part that like the other side misses. Like, there's certain people who are like really good at clickbaiting, but then get really lazy on the actual content itself. People have to actually want to watch the whole video. You have to have like a high watch time for YouTube to like push your content to a broader scope of people. And I think that like a really interesting thing that I had to sort of deal with for a while was like when I created content for Beyond Summit was like, okay, we worked tirelessly for days shooting content overnight, editing it, turning it around a day, getting gamers to act, which is like the hardest part. And then it goes out on YouTube and you go look at the viewership and it's like 100 people watched it. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, I worked so hard on that thing and like no one cares. Like, is the problem them? Is it me? I think after a long time, I realized that YouTube content is just in a totally different like place now than it was like 10 years ago when like regular comedy sketch style stuff just worked for being funny. And there's a nuance that you have to learn in how to make video. I mean, short form is kind of taking over, but I still believe deep in my heart that there's long form that is based in good writing and comedy that still works. It's just about finding that. And then when it comes to like analytical style videos that like certain, I don't know, like Awesome Sauce or like whatever like YouTubers make, I think it's just about translating it to a broad enough audience and removing enough layers of friction to where your average person, I mean, the documentary does a really good job of this, where the average person can learn to care about the thing and learn to appreciate it first. And then from there, they can learn to appreciate all of the more nitty gritty or detailed content styles that exist. But I think that pretty much everyone does a really bad job of both translating the outside of content to a broad audience and then keeping people watching on the inside for reasons either they feel rushed or they're bad at what they do or whatever it is. And I think that because Melee, because the ceiling of what you can earn creating content specifically for Melee is so low, and you can't really like make a huge career out of it. You can only use it really as a stepping stone to get a job somewhere else in esports where you can make a career. I think there's no one besides a handful of people who care so much about purely the art of it that they're willing to make it that good and put that much effort to it. The same amount of effort you might put into being good at the game itself. And so Melee content specifically is suffering for that. And I think that generally people just need to care more, learn to understand the game more, not the game Melee, but the game of uploading online content, and generalize content enough to where more people understand it without losing the nuance and how special and how detailed you're willing to sort of describe things to a normie audience, if you will, in the actual video, so that people watch the entire thing.
It's not even just Melee, Nick. It truly isn't. It is all of gaming. I cannot tell you. And I was thinking about this exact same thing you're pointing out right now when I was explaining the SWT stuff early on. I don't need to explain that to Slime and Aiden here, right? Obviously, they're in the thick of it. They understand as much context. But I know that there are thousands of people that listen to our show in any given month that don't have that context. They haven't been actively terminally online on Twitter for the past week during all of this meltdown in the Smash community, right? So it's useful to tell them what the context is before I ask two experts here, right, about their thoughts on the situation, right? That it's but when I was asking that question very specifically, I was thinking, or doing that elaboration, I was thinking, I'm sure there are people in this Twitter space who are going, well, this dude's a fucking normie, bro. And I'm not, but at the same time, like, we as a community do such a bad job at listening to the minority opinion on that sort of stuff, on that critique, where it's the majority of the opinion are thankful that those types of explanations exist. And I think about really this sort of, I mean, I'm building a whole company around this, but I think about this more broadly, what changed in 2018 when Fortnite blew up and gaming became a part of everyone's vernacular of all ages, right? The young people that play it and the older people that know kind of what it is more broadly. And I'm like, those people need to weigh in. They're not going to get it by me sitting down and telling you why Faker is the GOAT. They're like, that's not how they're going to get it.
Yeah.
How they're going to get it is by telling an emotional human story of how someone either overcame adversity, how someone dealt with something difficult in their lives, or, we're working on something right now at Overcome that I'm really excited about. That's a true crime doc and telling like this fucking scammy story that a bunch of people don't know about. That is really exciting to work on because it's like, yeah, it's about gaming, but at the same time, like, you're not gonna have to get gaming to understand it.
Yeah,
and that's the point.
Make sure your thumbnail and title's good too, because that's fucking 90%.
Well, it's not even for it's not even for. See, here's the broad part is like we're talking about YouTube here, right? Like all you three guys like have a very successful YouTube channel. We're building one that's growing, and like it's not even about YouTube to me. There's so much money on the like, in the audio world, Spotify and Odyssey and Amazon Music side of things, and in the video world, like the OTT distributors, Netflix, Hulu, etc., that want content. But when they get in a pitch meeting with someone that like doesn't understand how to talk more broadly about these ideas, they just stare at you blankly and they don't get it, and so they don't buy your shit.
Wait, you said
but they're interested.
You said Amazon Music and what?
Amazon Music, Odyssey, and
Odyssey,
Spotify.
These nuts.
Yeah, there you go. You're the second one of your group of friends that has the D's nuts on this show. Ludwig is better though, I will say. Yeah, nonetheless, my point is that gaming has a storytelling problem more broadly. We need to stop thinking about what the 200,000 people on YouTube want and start thinking about what the 2 million people want around the world and how we do that.
Something challenging that I think is to me, like when I think about pieces that really move the needle on like the interest in this sport, they're all pretty expensive, like long form projects relatively, right? Like we kind of got lucky that the Smash documentary happened, but the biggest example that I can think of is the F1 docuseries, like literally changing the landscape of that entire sport. And if you watch episodes of that show, it has very little to do with watching actual racing. It's entirely framed around like human relationships and like the struggle between these teams, what their goals are each season, focused entirely on the racers, the managers, like, and that literally changed that sport. Like it's so I'm trying to remember how much bigger it actually is, but like it changed how the sport is functionally works, how it is presented to people, how it's monetized. Like they are going through so many changes because of that piece of media. And similarly, I think like the most moving or interesting pieces of gaming content that I've ever watched are like something I think about is like the Red Bull documentary about OG winning TI for the first time, which has honestly very little to do with Dota. I think a weakness of TrueSight, even though it's really, really good, is that you have to be somewhat engaged with the game itself, because it's confined to TI weekend itself and what is happening in the games in a lot of instances, even though it's like really beautiful and well done. It feels like more like a love letter to like the Dota community that's paying attention rather than something that's meant to draw people in. Whereas the OG documentary, it has like 6.5 million views, and it just tells this story of like how this team of like misfits who weren't supposed to get there won the biggest prize in gaming ever. And it doesn't really matter that it's about Dota at all. And I think it's really, really hard for somebody to invest all that money and time into a project like that, because you're kind of gambling on its effectiveness, like when you're finally done with it. And we had a second documentary, right? Like we had Metagame, and I think it didn't quite have the same punch that like the first one did for like a variety of reasons. But that's like an example of like so much time and money was like invested into a project that like, you know, ultimately didn't have the same output that the first one did, which maybe is like too monstrous of a task, right? In a similar way that the F1 like Netflix series like literally changed the sport. Obviously, the Smash documentary changed the competitive Smash scene in a way that like I don't think will ever be replicated. But I wanted to note that is like I think it's like for somebody who makes content like passively in the scene, it's hard to say like, you know what, my money and time for the next 4 years are going to be about making this like documentary piece about gaming, and I'm going to make it good enough. And I don't know, like you're saying, it's like that probably needs to like land in a pitch room somewhere at like a streaming service or something like that. And the overlap in like skills and connections for somebody with like the knowledge and capability of making that piece, but also the like the connections to like get into that room and also present it well is just really difficult. I don't know if like there's anybody who can do it at the moment or is going to do it. But I think that like F1 version of the F1 version for us, for esports as a whole, for Smash maybe even, like it exists. It can be done.
It's on the cosmic bookshelf. Someone's just got to pull it off.
Yeah, I will say on that note, you know, you can't like, it has to be thought out. The storytelling around that, something like that has to be thought out, right? And you do have to listen to the quote unquote normies. You have to listen to the people who aren't engaged because their perspective is important. Because if they don't understand it, then probably other audiences won't either. And I think like we're very resistant to that as a community because
gatekeeping, Jacob, gatekeeping is so fucking fun.
Yeah, I wonder what that means, Slime.
I love gatekeep. I'm not kidding. It is so fun to feel like you are in on something that other people aren't. It's like crack, okay? And I personally need to be someone who's like, you know what? Let's bring more people in. Let's open the gate.
You know, it's something
you made
me.
But it has to be thought about in the ideation. It's truly like, and I'm glad there are a lot of people listening to this because it truly has to be thought about in the ideation. You can't just say you can't. And I use this example because it's so funny to me. So Navi, one of the best Counter-Strike teams in the world, basically came out and they like did a documentary on Simple, who is the best player to ever play Counter-Strike ever. Fantastic player, extremely talented. What I'm about to say is not to take away from his skill. Or to detract from him in that way. But they put out part 1 of this documentary on YouTube, and they were like, we're going to sell part 2 to Netflix. And it was so clear that no one had like thought of that before they made it, and 2, that it like said this publicly, or 2, had ever been in a pitch room with Netflix. But that was literally an on the record public statement from someone in this team. And I'm just sitting here laughing I'm laughing my ass off. It's like, because like I watched part 1 and it's cool. It like catalyzes his life, but like so much of the other content does, it goes into like why, you know, how in the game is he more skilled than everyone else he plays against? And I was like, that is the least important
it's
part.
not about
like,
that part.
So it is the least important part. The more important part is about all the backstory that he has, the issues he's had with anger management, everything else.
Biggest thing I told people to contextualize Worlds to people this year, like why Worlds Finals was so cool, what was so exciting about it, what the thing that consistently like worked and drew people in that like don't really follow League or maybe don't even follow gaming. It's like all of these people play League of Legends. Like 100 million plus people. It's played by the entire world. And it comes down to these 2 guys who went to high school together like 10 years ago. And it's like the end moment of that to define one person's career or the other person to solidify themselves as the greatest person to play the most popular game ever. And like, that's why this matters. It's like it's this beautiful story is like, if me and Slime went to high school and then we were in Genesis finals like 15 years from now, or we're playing in the NBA finals 15 years from now, like that's how I would contextualize it to people. And I wish that moment could be, I think Riot leaned into it and I think it was really good, but just because it happens in such a short period of time, it's difficult to like capitalize on that moment at the time. But maybe like, you know, maybe a year from now, maybe 2 years from now, there'll be a documentary about this season and like what that meant. And I think focusing on like a real human story that is like so against the odds, like it unfolded right before us. It got me to boot up League for the first time in like 2 years. Like all of these, it got my girlfriend who like didn't know what Twitch was 6 months ago to like be interested in it. And I think those things, like grabbing those moments is like what is so important.
I think that's a good note to end on, because that is again, I can't remember which other guest did this, but you all have made my business pitch for me, is what I'm doing in my career right now. So thank you very much for
clip
for
it
doing
and
that
ship
for
it.
Me. Clip it
Let
and ship
Aiden
it.
be your guide.
Aiden, you're my new Aiden and Nick. You're my new spokespeople. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Contract will
new job.
Contract will be in the
What
mail
about
tonight.
You talk about Sibians too much. You talk about Sibians too much. The guy at HBO,
too much.
the guy at HBO just want to listen to you talk about Sibians in the boardroom.
HBO, where they show nudity all the time. They don't know about Sibians.
But they have class in the meetings, I've heard.
Oh, Sibians aren't classy.
No.
Now we're beefing.
Thank you all so much for listening. We will be back this Wednesday, and thank you, Slime and Aiden, for joining us.
Thanks, Jacob. You're great, man.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks for having us on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching Visionaries on YouTube. For more content, please subscribe to the Overcome channel.